Backstage was really the very first industry publication that I read. A mentor of mine when I was growing up in Philly said, you have to read Backstage. You want to go to auditions and be a performer, you've got to read Backstage. And so I started picking it up, and I just started learning terminology and what people were looking for and asking questions about it. And it really unlocked a whole world for me, because I didn't know how you would go about getting those things. Like, how do you get one of those jobs? You have to know somebody, and you didn't. You just had to pick up a Backstage.
Oh, is this Backstage? Yes. I love Backstage. Oh, I used to have a subscription.
Oh, wonderful.
At the point that when I was looking for work, now I'm trying to get less work, so I don't read it.
You know, when I was first in New York, I'd go pick up my copies of Backstage and look for auditions and read the articles, and now, of course, it's, you know, the online presence, and so yeah, I've certainly known about Backstage for years and years.
I am old enough to remember when there used to be ads for designers for off-Broadway shows in Backstage, and I got some jobs out of it. So I have lovely thoughts about Backstage.
A lot of my friends that I still have to this day in LA were Backstage Westers, like massively. They were going out, find out about all kinds of auditions for commercials, for open calls. So I was well aware of Backstage West and how much it was helpful for my friends, you know, that were utilizing it.
I did. Well, I used to use it when I was in college, before, when I promised my parents I would not audition for anything and I would stay in school. I would always peek in Backstage, always.
I was in a national tour of Rent before and done some other things, but when I officially moved to New York is when I got those headshots, and I found them in Backstage.
One of the greatest things in my life, I remember I was doing I Love Your Perfect Now Change in Los Angeles, and Backstage wanted to do a feature story on me, and I was so excited. Because it was the paper that I used to look at for auditions when I first moved to the city in 92, 93, and to me it's part of the fabric of my DNA of being an actress in New York City.
I did. Are you kidding? I was Backstage, my savior. I mean, I got Guys and Dolls because of Backstage. I got Kiss with Spider-Woman because of Backstage. So, you know, of course, I'm ex-chorus boy right here.
I did when I first came to the city. Yeah, of course. I looked Backstage all the time.
It was actually part of our curriculum, was to read Backstage every single week. We were tested on it. We had to read Backstage and the New York Times Arts and Leisure section. Coming from Southern Illinois, I knew nothing of what Backstage was. I knew nothing of the theater scene. It was part of my education in learning what the business was.
Of course. Are you kidding? When I moved to the city, it was like the resource. You were like, what's going on in New York City in the theater scene? And it was like all about Backstage.
I had 3 roommates, and 2 of them were actors, and so they would that's what it was, and they would devour it. Yeah.
Back in the day, I did. When I was in college, I would flip to the back and then start to break down, write down what I needed to do in my notebook, who I needed to mail things to, what I needed to do. Yes.
Okay, so I worked at the Fulton Opera House, where I'm from, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they would job in, it's an equity theater, and they would job in actors from New York, and the actors from New York told me about Backstage magazine. And so I found an article that was an audition for the non-union national tour of The Sound of Music. And I came to New York in January of 2003 and auditioned for it, went to the open call and got the job, and ended up not going to college because I got this job on this tour, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. So like that was all thanks to Backstage.
But I am that weird person who, because I follow y'all on Twitter, I read every single article about like how not to be nervous. It's so funny. I'll be lying in bed at like 2 in the morning and I can't fall asleep, and I'm like, well, how not to be nervous in an audition? Great. I'll read about that. I read about like tips for actors. I read all of them.